welcome. This is the Public Works Podcast. Today, I got a real treat for you, a special treat from down under. We have David Jenkins. He is the CEO, Chief Executive Officer of Infrastructure Public Works Engineers of Australia. David, say what's up to everybody.
Yeah, hi. Good, great to be with you. Great to be with you, Joseph.
Sure thing. So, David, just some context to how you and I met. So I was at PWX, which is the big APWEA conference in Chicago.
Yep.
You said you were going to be out there. I'm like, I got to meet this guy. He's all over LinkedIn. Everybody knows this guy. I'm like, I got to meet him. And you blessed us with your presence on our little in-person podcast that we did. And I knew I had to have you back for a full show. I want to let you kind of give a background of what, not necessarily what got you into public works, but what got you into the association side of public works. Like, was 20-year-old David interested in being a CEO of an association, or did you kind of fall into it?
Yeah, well, it's a good question. And look, I have to say, when you did the podcast at the PWX, they were brilliant. And to get all the different personalities that you got on, it was excellent. And you say I'm all over LinkedIn, Joseph. Well, I certainly see your podcast popping up a lot down in this part of the world. So good on you. Look, the question is, did I sort of fall into association? I guess I did a little bit. I came from an education background. I used to be a teacher way back when, and I did a number of different things, got out of teaching, but association sort of appealed to me because it's about developing people's careers. I first started out in the accounting profession and sort of worked my way up with a big organization there. But I just really enjoy associations. I enjoy them because you're actually providing value for people, members, the professions that you're supporting and working with. And there is an educational component, and I think we'll get into that today, but I think you can really add value to members in terms of giving them the right education to develop their own careers.
I love your thought process in developing professionals. When I first got in the industry, when I first got into public works, I didn't know up from down. I didn't know anything about anything, but I knew one of my mentors said, hey, if you want to kind of fast track your way through your industry, is find the big association and get involved. It's kind of like, church or the gym. Like, go to the gym and figure out who the biggest guy in there and say, what workouts do you do? Like, how do you eat? If you go to church, volunteer instead of just sitting in a pew. So the same thing with association. You want to go and you want to also get involved. Getting knowledge from the people who have it to the people who want it is something that I'm huge on, but I've learned through my journey that not all associations are created equal. And we're going to talk about the good. We're going to talk about the bad. We're going to talk about things that are working and things that might be antiquated within associations. So I would say my first question is that delta, that gap, from the association, and we're a part, and I've been a part of them. You might have seen them along your journey. Might be 28 members and 26 of them are, they're staring at retirement. There's no new blood. They're always struggling for whether it's funds or struggling for energy from the members. And then you got associations that are 30,000 strong that you would think, they're doing the right things for the professionals, but they might not be missing it, So what are some of the things that you've seen in your journey that can help an association go, we need to start doing that so we can educate our professionals and actually add value?
Yeah. And look, associations are they're not dissimilar to any other type of organization. They've got to change, they've got to adapt. And I'm not sure that associations globally have necessarily done that as quickly as they need to. And you've identified a couple of problems just in your commentary there. And the first one is, associations all around the world. This isn't just a US thing, and it's not just an Australian thing. Getting people, young professionals, interested and excited in their association is something that we're all struggling with. And I think it comes back to a couple of things. First of all, young professionals are typically time poor. They've got a lot of things going on that work, families, etc. They don't. Also, they're not earning the most in terms of their careers. They're just getting started. They've just graduated, etc. So I think it becomes even more important that you're providing the right value for these people. And to me, that is about how do you support young people in their careers? Because if you're not providing that, they're going to be doing other things, and they don't necessarily associate being part of an association as a way to develop their career. So you've got to be quite overt about that. The other thing is, you talk about associations and, some are thriving, some are not. I think there's a couple of points to this. Associations have also got to find new ways to develop revenue. They've got to find new ways to bring money in, because if they can do that, they can provide more value to members. So with more money, more revenue, you've got more options. And the model is changing. I don't think it's any more, you're an association, you provide a conference once a year and you do a bit of PD. People want more from that. It comes back to what I said originally with young professionals. How can you help advance my career? To me, that is education. That is education that's recognized, and that is helping people at each stage of their career. So in IPWEA, we talk a lot about lifelong learners. And to support our members, we want them to be lifelong learners, so that as they progress their career and they need to, understand X or understand Y, they're going to come back to us because we provide the right education for them to be able to do that. Obviously, it's not all about education. And another point that you made is, associations, one of their key strengths, and we often need to be better at selling this, is you build a network. And if you can build a network, you've got people in different stages of their career. It's tapping into that network, because as any good recruiter will tell you, when you want to get that next job, actually networks are very, very important.
100%. You uncovered a couple terms. One was recognized education, and that was something that I love how it's 2 words, and I've been trying to say this to this association I'm a part of. Like, how can we get our education to be stamped by the powers that be of the industry? Because that will, I hate to say it, that will force other people in the industry who are in that position, who need a certification or a credential, to join our association, take said course, and now have that stamp on their diploma that says I can do said work. What do you say to those associations out there who are like, no, we're just going to roll out some personal development and not really worried about going through the state or going through the federal government to get the credential to be able to apply that? And like, they might be missing some, I hate to say it, money on the table.
Yeah. And look, I think when we built our micro-credential program in asset management, one of the key things was we wanted to link it into something that was internationally recognized, or a body that could give us that certification or that stamp. So in our world, there's an organization called the World Partners in Asset Management, which is a global accreditation body that, we went through a process. They assessed our educational programs, and they gave us a pathway to lead into their accreditation. And I think, all the points that you've just said, you need that credibility. Otherwise, why are people going to do the time and the effort to do it? Plus, also, part of being in a profession is you're trying to raise the level, the bar of the profession. So, being able to link into something, particularly an international accreditation, really adds value both to the person doing it and also the association. And as a byproduct, it's going to help in terms of your marketing, because if it doesn't link into something, or it's not recognized, or it doesn't have that stamp, then why would people spend the money to do it? And also, it's not just people that are doing, also organizations, because typically, people's professional development does come through the organization, and where the person can say, well, look, I'm going to be doing this course. It's through IPWEA or wherever, for example, it's internationally recognized there's a credential that is globally recognized. It's certainly going to make that business case a lot easier to get the money to do it.
Yeah. And speaking of getting the money, I feel like we're at a slippery slope, meaning, like, let's go generations. I know this is super generalizing everybody, but let's just do generations. So I would say the baby boomers, Gen X, they believe in associations. I would say the millennials, Gen Z, they're kind of like, why should I go? Like, I don't want to do that. It doesn't make sense. I think if we miss the millennials, miss the Gen Zers, the next generations won't even think about the associations. And what happens is, and what I learned is that if you can't get your boss's approval to spend the $1,500 to take said course, or to take those 3 hours out of your day to go to that monthly lunch, or to hop on a committee, if you can't get your boss's approval to do that, you're not going to do it. because they don't see the value in it. What have you seen to be able to get that, I would say, that buy-in from somebody who's not necessarily a member of the association, but for somebody to pitch it, market to their boss and say, hey, I want to go do this for myself and for my career, and it'll benefit the company or organization all alike, but I want to do this for me. Please let me go. Like, what have you seen in getting that done?
Yeah, look, I think let's go back to a point that you made right at the start of this podcast. You said, I wanted to talk to David because he's all over LinkedIn. And I said to you, well, same thing. I see you on LinkedIn. And I think this is where those, the millennials and it's not they don't value networking. They see networking as something that's different. It's all online. Therefore, in my generation, Gen X, in terms of us to progress our careers, we would go along to functions, to network, to meet people, because that was a key way in which we knew would help build our career. I am going to answer your question because you're saying, well, how do you market, how does the individual, the young person starting their career, market this to their boss? I think you've got to do a number of things. It's about what value does the education provide to the individual, but also what value does the education provide to the organization that individual is working for. So, because then it becomes an easier conversation. So in the micro-credential programs that we run, one of the, there's formative assessments, there's a requirement you do the various different modules, and there's an assessment at the end. But that assessment is contextualized to their particular organization. So the outcome is that they do all the learning, and then they get an assessment that is actually very relevant to the organization that they work for. Therefore, the individual person that's taken the course wins, but also the organization wins because it's helping them solve a problem because they've been through that whole process. So, and that makes the whole business case and the conversation with your boss to sign off a lot easier.
For sure. The from what I've seen is that when one joins an association, it's kind of like that, you throw a rock into a canyon. You're just waiting to see, like, if it makes a sound or if it does anything, or if there's, if something happens. How would you say somebody can make a splash, or even on the association side, how can we grab that new member, make them feel like they maybe, you familiar with the concept of buyer's remorse? You buy that new car, and all of a sudden you're like, okay, the salesman didn't call me back. I didn't get that email he was supposed to send me. It's that, did I make the right decision? How can an association cure that buyer's remorse of that young person or seasoned person when they join an association, so they know they made the right decision, and kind of bring them into the fold instead of just having them on a spreadsheet?
Yeah, look, I think there's a couple of things that the association can do and also the individual can do. The first thing is, it's like no different to any other type of organization. Membership associations really need to understand their members or new members. So in our world, in the public workspace, there's a variety of different careers. So right when someone joins, if they're in a particular area of public works, don't feed them very relevant information. You have to understand, what is it that they're, specifically, are they managing infrastructure assets? Are they managing condition assessments and out on the road? Are they whatever? But there are different interests that sit within, professions, and actually you need to have the sophistication in your communications and your marketing to be able to understand what's relevant for people. I think also it's about making sure that when someone joins, they do feel welcome, and there's a whole sort of, you get other members, there's welcome calls, you actually make time and effort to bring these people in and to make sure that they are communicated in a way that they understand what the offer is. Because sometimes, in fairness to associations, they do deliver value, but they're not always the best at communicating it. Then on the flip side, to fully answer your question, I think the onus is a little bit on the member, because you've got to get involved. Often there are various different committees and forums and discussion groups, and often associations are looking for volunteers to be involved in all sorts of different things. And it's being able to say, I'll put my hand up and give it a go, and I'm prepared to get involved. Because by doing that, it's like the old adage, the more you do, the more you're going to get out of something. And I think it's the same with associations.
Sure. That pesky not-for-profit tag. Again, I've
Yeah,
been a part of associations for a while now, like whether it's a
yeah,
church or a Rotary Club, whatever. Just because
yeah,
we think we're doing something good for society, or we have this
yeah,
altruistic, we're saving the trees, we're saving the manatees, and we fly this flag of greatness. It makes us think we could be bad at it. Let's be honest. It makes
yeah,
us think we
yeah.
can like not have to like spell check the flyer or not, just do things as if we're not responsible for our balance sheet or financial statement or pleasing our shareholders. How can an association innovate, grow with that nonprofit tag? How can they get that mindset of like, hey, we're just doing good things, so we just want everybody to have fun, and turn it into like, hey, this is a business, and the only way we're going to be more successful is we help more people out. When does that mindset switch come into play?
Look, it's a great question, and I'm glad you talked about it, because it's something that people don't like to talk about. Profit, money, revenue. But the fact is that, like any organization, you need to develop a sustainable financial revenue line. And this goes back to the previous comments around, if you think a conference, a bit of professional development is going to do that for you, that is not a sustainable business model. And so the way in which you pitch it or frame it is, the more money that can be generated, right? And by the way, this is by products and services that add value to members, right? And because and this is why education, to my mind, is such a good tool, because it delivers value for the member and it delivers value for the organization in terms of financial return. So there's a win-win situation. But with the more revenue that you can develop, the more products, the more services that you can also develop. And I think this is another thing that where associations sort of fall short on, is that you need to be thinking around the future. What does the future member need to know and understand to be able to be good at what they do? And so therein lies the opportunity, because if you provide that education, so for example, in the public workspace, like all professions, the advent of new technologies, what does that look like for the future public works professional? What does that mean for their job? What does that mean for their role? What does that mean for their career? That's where the opportunity for the association is to go, right, we need to be thinking about this, and then we need to be helping our members to navigate what a changing world looks like. And maybe that is developing educational programs that support them, and thereby everyone wins in the whole ecosystem.
Sure. Revenue streams. Let's talk about conferences first. I feel like a lot of conferences would suffer if it wasn't for the CEU, or the, not sure what you guys call it, but that continuing education credit, where you have a professional license and you have to get a certain amount of credits a year to be able to renew that license. Because let's be honest, a lot of the education is just not there. People are just going to these seminars, to get their paper signed so they can get out of here. I know you're a thinker. I know you're intuitive in regards to reading situations, people, like knowing kind of what's, seeing where the puck is going and not necessarily where the rugby ball is at, because you guys play rugby in Australia. Where do you think the future of the conference is going? I got a ton of thoughts on it. Just empty your brain on what you think of the actual conference for a lot of these associations.
Yeah, I think it's got to be sort of with conferences, we're trying to think about, how do we engage the audience, one, so it's not just sat there in a series of different lectures. Also trying to develop outcomes from the conference. So, and look, there's various different ways to do that, but, do you engage the audience? Typically they're all, they're experts in their field, or some of them are, they're developing, they've all got a lot of great minds out there. You can develop communiques that you can use for advocacy approaches to government. You can develop, you can even develop new courses or programs off the basis of engaging your audience and working with them and sort of running sort of sessions and workshops. So I think conferences have got to go. It's not just the days of just people standing up there and keynote speakers. It's always, that's not going to go away. But how can you deliver outcomes off the back of the conference? How can you get people engaged in the learning, so they're actual learning outcomes, rather than there's a whole lot of sessions, I go along, I listen for 5 minutes, then I'm on the phone for 20 minutes, tick it off, and I tick my CPD. How have you made sure that learner's actually engaged changed along the way? What have they done? And I think the onus there is on the sort of conference organisers and associations to think of new ways to do that.
You know, I appreciate you saying that. Just thinking of new ways. One thing and I might be wrong, and of course, you know, you can play devil's advocate or disagree with me, but I think that conferences can be flipped on their head. Meaning, instead of the one person in front of the room of 50 people delivering his thoughts on X, Y, and Z, I think those 50 people in the crowd who showed up for that topic can deliver their thoughts on X, Y, and Z. And we take that. Of course, I'm biased to video and podcast and creating content and all that. But if we get 10,000 people to a conference, instead of having the 80 people who are supposed to be speakers at that conference, those 10,000 people who are there, let's have them share their thoughts. Because if you think about it, the type of person that signs up and pays money and takes time to go to a conference is different than the person who doesn't do that. I'll just be honest. Like, they're not saying one is better, but one is actually trying to get better, and one is actually doing better by voting with his wallet and going. So I do think that we should not cater, but focus more on the people who showed up and saying, hey, what do you think? What can you offer? What can you do for us? Instead of saying, hey, thanks for coming. Thanks for your paying. Go sit in the seat, and hopefully you get something out of these, you know, these meetings you're going to. But I do think we miss a lot when we don't allow the people who show up to share their thoughts. Because let's be honest, the you know, Billy Bob will go to a room 123B just because what stood out to him on the itinerary, because he knows about that and he wants to learn more about it. Let's get what he knows already and see if that makes sense to everybody else. And then also, one of my beef is, you know, a lot of people who listen to the podcast might know this, is the golf tournament. I can't stand golf. I think we need to do away with the golf tournament. I feel like it's a boomer construct, but I feel like pickleball is something easier for millennials, younger people, and then also people who didn't grow up playing golf. Like, let's be honest, my dad never played golf. I didn't know how to play golf. A lot of women don't play golf, but they can get out there and play pickleball for a little bit. So I do think we need to rethink the golf tournament at these conferences.
Well, I think we're sort of saying the same thing, in the sense that, you know, there's a different way to, there's different models to run conferences and to engage the audience, rather than the standard way of doing it, someone speaking. So I think we're totally agreed. I think what you've got to try to do, though, is to find an effective mechanism for people to be able to contribute, because otherwise you're going to have free fall. What we did do a couple of years ago is that we were putting together a white paper that we were then going to use to government to sort of highlight some of the key areas where we thought that the government should respond to, particularly around capacity and capability within the profession. So building capacity and building capability. What we did was we set the scene right on the first day of the conference, and we got at various different points. We asked people to contribute in different ways. So different mechanisms of communication. So, you know, you could write something down, send it to us, you could send it through the app, you could do whatever. And then actually we did a workshop at the end of the conference. So we got everyone in the room and we said, right, this is what this is the outcome we were trying to achieve. These are the different inputs that we've had. And then we had a facilitator that engaged the audience to put together this white paper that we then used as a plank on behalf of all the people there, and indeed on behalf of the profession, to then go and talk to government officials and politicians around some of these things. So I guess it was involving the audience, but it was being very specific in what we were looking in terms of an outcome. And look, in terms of the social side of things, I mean, you talk about pickleball. I do think that the social functions are a key component of conferences, because that's an opportunity for people to really, you know, talk about some of the real issues that they're facing, and, you know, talk to colleagues and stuff. And that's a real benefit to these types of things. And the traditional mode of running golf or whatever it is, you've got to think about how you're going to facilitate social functions that are going to get the best out of people and all the people in the room.
Yeah. No, I do agree. Some of the best conversations I've had have been in the hallway, you know, or you know, in the middle of the exhibitor floor, or even at some of those after party events. You know, of course, I wish there was a more systemized way to get somebody who might not be on there. Because again, when I first started, I wasn't in the know. I didn't know how to navigate these huge conferences, so I didn't know like what to do to get invited to such and such rooftop party that this company was throwing that everybody wanted to go to. And the more you learn, the more you know like what to do. But like there probably should be a simplified way to be able to find your spots after hours, because again, we all fly to this location. We all want to do something with the people that we showed up with. So let's kind of facilitate that. Let's talk about trust for a little bit. A lot of people kind of look with the side eye to some associations, might be skeptical and like, why would I pay for this? Why would I keep showing up? What do they do for me? Who are they going to bat for? They say they're on Capitol Hill, lobbying for us and doing this for us, but I don't really trust government anymore. Like, everybody's skeptical about everything. How can an association put people at ease and say, hey, yes, we are lobbying for you. We're promoting what you do. We're educating and advocating the general public about what you guys and girls do, and to relax and say, hey, you can trust us.
Yeah, look, I mean, there's always a place for professional bodies to advocate, which is quite a broad term, by the way, advocate to government, because associations can, if you've got a body of membership, 10, 20,000 members, and you can go to decision makers and say, on behalf of 10, 20,000 members, these are some of the key issues that are affecting us, and these are some of the things that we would like you to consider, is always a stronger argument than individual organizations and individual people. So there is always a role for associations to do that. But in terms of building trust, this is where I think, associations need to be quite deliberate in how they consult with members. And look, one of the great things about memberships, and sometimes one of the frustrating things, is that you have so many different stakeholders, and the bigger the organization, the association that you have, actually the harder it is. I think back to the days when I worked in a major an accounting body, 160,000 members, and you had everything from tax accountants to audit people, and then the audit people weren't interested in what the tax people, and the tax people weren't interested in what the audit people did. So it becomes harder. But I do think you've got to be deliberate in your consultation before you start going out and, in inverted commas, advocating on behalf of the membership. There will be key areas that all membership can decide on, and you've got to work through, well, what are the major priorities, and use different mechanisms and feedback mechanisms to engage members. Because again, this goes back to knowing your members, because some members are, they're fine to turn up to events and talk about these things. Others want to deliver it via email. Others want to deliver it by new forms of media, podcasts, etc., whatever. So you've got to think about the different channels that you use to get that feedback from members. Taken on board, ultimately you've got to make a decision and move forward. But if you've been deliberate in your consultation phase, and then also it's not just doing the advocacy, it's then actually reporting back what you've managed to do or not do, because then there's the whole feedback loop, right? And I think if you can do all that, and it's not easy, but if you can do all that, then I think certainly the whole trust factor, the rating goes up.
Sure. And just transparency, like you said, report back on what happened or didn't happen, and people go, oh, I respect you. Thank you for telling me that. I think David Jenkins' definition of success with an association, is it the amount of members you get? Is it the amount of revenue you do? Is it the size of your conference? Is it the amount of people that go through your certification program? Like, how can it, like, for some new associations popping up, how can they define success? Like 160,000 members, that sounds successful, but there's probably times where you're like, ooh, we could do better. So give us your definition of success.
Yeah, and look, it's something that I'm actually sort of grappling with, because it's not, more isn't always more successful. So I mean, the typical modes of success that associations look at is, how many new members have we grown this year? How many have retained their membership? How many people have engaged or bought our products and services? What success did we have or otherwise in terms of advocacy to government and some of the outcomes that we managed to achieve there? And they're all fine, but I think there is one particular metric that I've struggled with a little bit, which is member engagement. And you typically hear this with associations. They talk about, our member engagement and are our members engaged, yes or no? And it's a sort of quite a general metric, but really it's talking to, you are a member, and this goes back to what we've been talking about over the last 20 minutes. If you're a member, are you truly engaged? Are you involved in some of the committees or whatever? Have you made some, submissions or whatever? Have you attended a conference? Have you taken a particular training course or whatever? So ultimately, are you deriving value from that membership? So I think there's probably, and mine's far smarter than mine, will probably be able to work this out, but I think there's certainly something we can do around that member engagement metric that really does look at, which talks to, are you delivering value as an association? Are you delivering value for members? And is it a value that they really, cherish and they want to keep hold of?
Yeah. Let's talk committees for a second. I believe committees are the cream of the crop of a certain, niche subsection of an association, whether it's like personal development, professional development, whether it's operations and management, whether it's like, water, wastewater. There's all these different committees within certain associations. What's been David's way to get the most out of that dream team, out of that, cream of the crop of a committee to be able to support the rest of the membership?
Yeah. And look, I think, it's a tricky one because some associations, they run these committees all via volunteers. Very hard thing to do when you run it all via volunteers because, it's in terms of getting outcomes or outputs, people got busy day jobs. I do think that, committees and various different discussion groups of associations, there needs to be some sort of paid staff element to help manage all the logistics and all this. I know it's very granular, but that's actually a reality because it's difficult otherwise. Look, it's part of the value of being a member is that you can be involved in some really very niche areas of the profession, and these committees and these discussion groups fulfill that need. So it's always a fine balance between letting those things evolve and members sort of running with some of this stuff, making sure that it's still aligned in some way to the organization and the organization's strategy and goals. I think that's important. And then also providing the necessary support from a paid resource point of view is also important because it's supporting the members, supporting outcomes, and it's helping managing some of the logistics.
Sure. Yeah, I do think that committees, when done right, are pretty powerful. But when it's done wrong, it's like, why did I join this hour-long call once a month?
Yeah, and look, I think and this is where I've seen it done well, and is that all the various different committee chairs, you bring in once a year, and this is when you sort of go through the strategy. What are the core objectives? What are we, overall, what are we trying to achieve? And what is, to one of your questions to me, what does success look like? What are some of the outcomes we want to get? We're not dictating to you exactly what you're going to do, but if we can all if you can understand the bigger picture and the bigger lens, I think that's good for them. I think the organization gets, the association gets a better outcome, and it does help, in terms of getting things done that move things forward.
Sure. David, this has been great so far. One last question for you. Survival mode. Most associations, whether you're 200 members, 20 members, 20,000 members, you're kind of still in a mode of survival because you're probably losing more members than you're gaining every year. It's a sign of the times, whether it's a church, in-person gym. Once COVID hit, everybody went to home gyms and left the big box gyms. Any group setting is probably losing people. What's one bold move, big shift that an association could take to grab some of those members leaving out the back door to get the ship going in the right direction?
Ask yourself the question, what is the value that you're providing to the members? Is it the right value? Ask yourself that question again, and then ask yourself that question again. And don't, go out to people that have left, that have rejoined. Go out to members who are 30, 40 years old. Go out to the new member. Ask the question, what is it that you find of value that we do? And focus really hard on making sure you deliver on that. And it's not but I think I know. And, the two people that I met last week at the so-and-so committee told me, you really have to do your homework. And that's no different to any commercial organization when they're selling products and services. If you're not selling the right product, you're not going to be in business. And this is where associations have got to turn their mind and think, okay, we're not a commercial entity, but what we're trying to do is no different. Our shareholders just happen to be called members. And members, like shareholders, want value. And if you're not providing shareholders or members value, then you're not doing what you're meant to be doing. And it sounds a bit,
it's too simple, man.
Yeah. But it sounds basic. But I think sometimes we just get caught up on things, and it is sometimes just going back to the basics, Joseph. And I think from the discussions we've just had today, I think we're on a similar page there.
Back to the basics, baby. David, where can people find more about you at? And then also, how can they support?
Yeah, look, our organization, IPWEA.org, we are, so those people listening are going, is IPWEA, where? Australia. So we're literally a similar organization, very similar to the American Public Works Institution Association based in the US. We happen to be based in Australia and New Zealand. So I can be contacted, david.jenkins@IPWEA.org. Always happy to speak on these sorts of things, various other matters. And it's been an absolute delight, Joseph. Thank you ever so much for the opportunity.
Sure thing. Thanks for hopping on. To all the listeners out there, make sure you follow David on LinkedIn. He's always posting some spicy, thought-provoking content. And again, he doesn't bite, so hit him up if you want to talk to him. Hopefully, we'll see David at PWX in Houston, because I saw him at PWX in Chicago. If you see him, give him a high five for me. But any final words before we get out of here?
No, just thanks, Joseph, and thanks for all the good work that you're doing in the public workspace. I think just the way in which you promote your podcasts, promote the profession, promote the public works profession is a great thing, and I appreciate that. And thank you for having me on.
Appreciate it. All right, this has been the Public Works Podcast, and thank you everybody for tuning in.